Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody? I feel like I've been away for quite a while. So, for those that don't know, I was just on a 2 week vacation in Florida, golfing with a whole bunch of my girlfriends. So, it was great, but I'm happy to be back. Not so happy that I'm back here with the terrible weather. That does not make me happy. So, hi, Sarah Lee from Charlotte, North Carolina. Hello, Marlene. If you're just joining us, leave me a little note as to where you're joining me from. So, today, again, these Facebook Lives aren't quick because I know everybody is busy on a Monday. But I kind of wanted to jump in and kind of like try to get back in the swing of working. So, I was thinking a lot about Stitch in the Ditch and how there are a lot of people that actually don't like to stitch in the ditch. Um, I am a firm believer that if you're doing custom work, that it is worth it to do Stitch in the Ditch. But I know that not everybody feels that way. So I thought we could talk, one, a little bit about Stitch in the Ditch, and two, maybe talk about some alternatives. So one of the things about Stitch in the Ditch that's fairly important, I feel, is that if your seams are pressed open, I do not suggest stitching in the ditch. And the reason is because as you are stitching in the ditch, really you're just kind of stitching on the batting, right? So you're in the ditch and there's a greater chance of you nipping a thread that is holding your piecing together, and then your piecing might start coming apart. So I'm a firm believer that if you are pressing your seams open, do not stitch in the ditch. So the two alternatives that we're going to talk about are good for if you have your seams pressed open. So you do want to press your seams to one side. So I'm going to switch my camera, and again, we're going to hope that the tech gremlins did not come and mess up my my tech while I was gone. So we're going to go to an overhead camera. So I just kind of wanted to show you, this is just a little practice piece that I have. And when you are pressing your seams, right, you're going to press them obviously to one side. And let me see if I can zoom in. Let's see if I can, give me just a second. Just want to see if I can zoom in even more. And I can. Okay, so we're looking at this, right? And you'll see that my seams are pressed to one side. So with this, okay, this is pressed to my darker fabric. So there is a high side and a low side to your ditch, right? So the low side would be the side of where the seam is not pressed to. So in this particular one, my low side is going to be on my solid fabric. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stitch in the ditch. I'm not going to stitch up on the high side because there's no place for it to hide. So when I come over here, my seam is actually pressed to the light side, to my solid fabric. So the low side of my ditch is going to be on my patterned fabric. So that is where I would stitch in the ditch. Now you'll notice, like, every once in a while you can wobble and bobble right up onto the high side of the ditch. So when at all possible, I do like to hold my ruler on the high side of the ditch so that if I wobble, I'm wobbling off onto the low side. You tend not to see it quite as much. So again, just remember, low side, high side, you want to be stitching on the low side. One of the things too that you want to make sure that when you're looking at your seams, that they're not twisted, right? So they'd be twisted, they would look kind of like this, and this would be this way, okay? Because then you're gonna have to jump. Okay, so make sure that your seams are all pressed and you don't have any twisted ones. You can still stitch in the ditch if you have the twisted seam, but you will have to jump and there could potentially be a little bit of thread showing. Okay, so Leanne has a question, so let me just pop that in here. When stitching in the ditch, what color thread do you use? Do you try and match to the lighter or darker fabric? Okay, that is a great question, Leanne. So typically, I am using Aurifil's monofilament thread. That's just what I like. But if for some reason you are not a fan of monofilament thread, then I would try to match it, Leanne, close to the fabric that you're actually stitching on. Okay, so if you're going back and forth between lighter and darker fabric, right? So if this were like a really dark fabric versus this, then I would definitely be using the monopoly thread, because you will, if I use light here, right, and then come over here and this is a dark fabric, you're going to see the light on the dark. And alternatively, it's going to be the same if you start with a dark thread here, okay, and hop over here, it'll disappear here, but it's going to show on your lighter fabric. So the monopoly thread is actually my favorite. So I will do most of my stitch in the ditch with that, if at all possible. For something like this, Leanne, I would probably be using a thread that matched this fabric here, because I do believe that it would be hidden when I got over to here. Okay. It also depends on how good are you at your stitch in the ditch. So that's just something to think about as well. I always say, like, just practice, practice, practice in order to get better. Now, let's just say that you don't love stitching the ditch, right? Because believe me, I get that. It is not always the best, most fun thing to do. You know, you're pulling out a ruler, and it's going to make your quilting time a little bit longer, okay? But I am just going to go back to say, I am a true believer that if you're doing custom work, you should be doing stitch in the ditch. Okay, so again, we're going to hope that the tech gremlins are good to me, and we're going to hop on over, and I'm just going to quickly show you a couple of alternatives for your stitch in the ditch. And there we go. No. Okay, give me a second, and let's see if I can revive this. And it doesn't look like it wants to, so I'm going to, let's try something different. Let's see if I can change this one. No, I don't know what's going on. Of course, it was working earlier, and now it doesn't want to work. And that is always the case. Sugar, and that is not what I want to say. Okay, let me unplug and replug, and if not, I'll just tell you what my alternatives are. There we go. All right. No, it doesn't want to work. Well, that is just a shame. Okay, so let's go back. I'm not quite sure what is going on with that, but my two favorites, my one, well, really my all-time favorite for an alternative is continuous curves. So let's see if I can do it this way. So yeah, you can kind of see. So we'll go the old school route. So as far as, let's see, this would normally be where I would stitch in the ditch, right? So I would go and I would stitch in the ditch around all of that stuff, okay? So if I didn't want to stitch in the ditch, continuous curve is a great thing, and you can do it for rectangles, you can do it for squares, you can do it for triangles. So here you're just starting in one corner and you're going and bouncing around. And the reason it's called continuous is because you can start in one spot, right, and bounce around. Of course, I'm not doing a fantastic job, but I think you guys get the picture of how it would be. When you do something like this, it's best to look where you want to land when you're doing it with your machine. And even when you're doing it, say now if I pay attention, you'll see I hit my points a little bit better. Okay, so you can do something like that, and it's continuous, which makes it go by really quick, right? Now, what if, I always say, like, if you're not really good at your, you know, you kind of wobble a little bit, right? You can add a second, and it kind of takes away from how it looks, okay? So I love, love, love that. You can also add a little wave in there. That's a little bit more forgiving. That's a good one. You can add, you can do loops, right? Whoops. Right, and it kind of creates something like that. Hi, Karen, how are you? Yeah, the alternatives for seams open is what Karen is asking about. So these are all like a good alternative for when your seams are pressed open, because you don't want to do that stitch in the ditch on them. So these are kind of fun, right? You can do it a little closer. And then you can add to it. As many as you want, right? So you can really kind of have fun with it. As far as you can also, alternative to that is to do your 1/4 inch, right? So your seams are pressed open and you don't want to stitch in your seams for obvious reasons. You can do your 1/4 inch. Again, this is takes a little bit more time because you are starting and stopping. So if we moved over to here, it would be a start and a stop here, right? And then a start and a stop here. It still looks really good. It's just those starts and stops do take a little while. So leave it in the comments for me if you tend to, when you're thinking about your quilting design, whether you are actually worried about starting and stopping. I typically don't think about that anymore, but I do know that a lot of people do. So here we can go something like this, 1, 2, right, to make it continuous. So something like that. Again, it's a little messy, but I stitch it much better than I actually draw it. One of the things that I like to do too is I start here and do something like that. So tell me what you think. Hi, Gwendolyn, how are you? Starts and stops are critical for you. Okay. Yeah, they're definitely not for me. I don't think about them. I will travel up to 10 inches before starting and stopping. Love that. How do you do tie-offs when you start and stop? So Leanne, typically when I am starting and stopping, if I'm not on a show quilt, I'm just doing tiny, tiny stitches or a little bit of a back tack. If I'm on a show quilt, I'm actually going to bury my threads just like I would in hand quilting, right? So I'm gonna pull my bottom thread to the top. I'm going to knot them, and then I'm gonna take a needle and just thread it and pop it down into the batting. So that's kind of how I roll. So hopefully this helps you a little bit in coming up with some alternatives to stitch in the ditch. Again, there are many. If for some reason all of a sudden, like later on today, you go, oh my gosh, I have another one, please, please, please come back to this Facebook post and leave it so that we can all utilize it, because we are all looking for alternatives to stitch in the ditch. All right, everybody, I hope you guys have a fantastic Monday. Thank you for bearing with me for my tech issues. I am not sure what's going on other than it is Monday. So have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you guys later.